here. So, Dr. Sam, we are very grateful to be with you here. And we are happy you shall share your experience with us. And you won't leave us the way we came. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anderson, for the kind words. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here to say a word or two. I belong to the two groups here, at least for the last 17 years. I've had one leg in the academia. I've also had one leg in journalism practice, especially broadcast media. So I was asked to talk about science reporting. I don't know if someone's going to be helping me there. So science journalism can be described as that part of social activity which is primarily concerned with the gathering, packaging, and reporting of science-related news and views to the public in a timely manner. This is usually achieved through various media outlets, including print, electronic, now we have the internet. Next. There are quite a number of reasons as to why it is important for scientists to share their findings with the media, because in most cases, when researchers conduct research, the studies are going to be published in journals where very few people are going to have access. So it is important that scientists and researchers share their findings with the media. One, because research is meant to benefit society by raising public awareness and innovations that enhance development. It is never conducted to satisfy just our curiosity as researchers. So of course, we know in research, passion is key. You can't conduct research in areas that you're not passionate about. But that's not the major aim of conducting research. Even when you're passionate about something, you want to benefit society. You want to raise public awareness and innovations that enhance development. The innovations that you come up with must be implemented for research to be purposeful. So how is the general public going to access these innovations if you do not interact with the media, which is a link between the experts and the general public? Again, people who share their lives with researchers seldom see the results of their efforts. Yet, in the first instance, it's an ethical obligation to share findings with participants. But the best way for you to share, especially if the sample was so big, the best way to share your results is by approaching the media, because the media channels information to a mass audience. So it is important, because it is also an ethical obligation for us to share findings with participants. Just make findings more comprehensible for the public, because in majority of the cases, most researchers are trained to write for fellow specialists. So you're writing, you publish a document that people within UVRI can comprehend. But the research is not meant for people within UVRI. At one time we had a national scam of the Valley Dams. So one of the key figures involved, when she was questioned in Parliament, the parliamentarians were like, we are not seeing this Valley Dam. Says, because you're not technical enough. But the Valley Dams are there. So that was a very dangerous precedent, because the Valley Dams were never for scientists, they were never for experts. So if the ordinary users, the end users can't see them, but for you insist that they are there, then it's already a problem. So journalists and the media help to make our work as researchers comprehensible, because the jargon, the technical terms we use as scientists, you're going to be talking about inferential statistics, correlation, causal modeling. Those things don't mean anything even to the King of Britain, who is an expert in English, who is supposed to be the top of the English language. They don't mean anything. They don't. So when you interact with the media, you're able to break these things down. They will probe, ask simpler questions to help the audience understand. Because in journalism, we say that journalism is not literature. In literature, it is okay to write, and it takes 1,000 years for people to keep interpreting what you wrote. Until today, students studying literature are still examining on books written by people like William Shakespeare hundreds of years ago. So for literature, it is okay. But for journalism, we've got to understand the story at the first instance. In fact, journalism stories in journalism should not be allegorical in nature. I hope you know what an allegorical communication is. It's double-faced with both latent and manifest meaning. So a journalist shouldn't write statements that are allegorical in nature. Somebody should be able to understand at the first instance. So interaction with the media helps us to make our information more comprehensible to the end users. Even if we wanted people to access the journals, there are very few journals that allow everybody to read the findings. You have to pay to access. To access. And I've had trouble as a researcher. Sometimes you publish your works. Of course, they are good for your promotion in the academia. But people who see the titles want to access the readings. But then they've got to pay to access those journals. So at the end of the day, they see fancy and interesting titles, but they can't access. So at the end of the day, you ask, what is the essence of research? Is it for my personal satisfaction, to get promotions, to be able to win grants? Because I mean, if your research profile is big, it also helps you in winning grants. So is that the purpose of research? Certainly not, certainly not. So few journals allow open access. Majority are limited. Majority are limited. So when we come to the press, we are able to open our findings to the general public. Evidence has also shown that more widespread press coverage results in a greater number of citations. There was a study by Brigham Young University in the United States in 2008. And of course, several other studies over the years have shown that wide press coverage of results in a greater number of citations. So even if you want to be selfish, this is beneficial for you as a researcher, as an academician, that once people read about something in the press, many would want to go online and find the publications that you wrote. So among the many that look for your publications, you're going to get people who are going to cite your works, which is a very good thing for you as an individual. So it's beneficial for you as a researcher, but it's also beneficial for the public. Next slide. A journalist can also showcase a research paper with its salient points with the comments from other experts, which gives the paper more legitimacy. You see, you conduct a study and you publish it, it is done. It's a summation of your findings and the people you researched about. But when just speak these things, it's not just going to be a copy and paste in the Vision or the Monitor or on the online publications. After getting your views, they will certainly look for other experts to pick their views. Now, this becomes a process of validation, which is critical in building the body of knowledge. So this legitimacy is very, very important. Of course, we know in the academia that in every specific field, there are certain names that we expect when we are supervising graduate students. And for example, you go into the literature chapters, the theory chapters, there are specific scholars and names that we expect for a particular theory, for particular methods. Why? Because they are authorities in the subject. So even here, for example, if you are a budding research, you've produced a research, scholars who are way ahead of you can be contacted by the media, and it helps to validate the studies that you have conducted, which is a very good thing for an individual research. Again, in the age of fake news, where everyone is a publisher in the social media, because today, everybody is a publisher. New media shattered the monopoly we had previously as media professionals. So today, everybody is a publisher. And some of these influencers are even much more powerful than some traditional media houses if you look at the numbers. Yet, majority of them are surviving on conspiracy theories and falsehoods. So of course, naturally, people want rumors, thrive on falsehoods. So psychologically, there is a way it can work as a coping mechanism. It can work as a coping mechanism. So in an age where fake news is the in thing, the need for evidence and expert opinion is more important than ever before. Expert opinion is more important than ever before. You remember the peak of COVID? You have a president of the United States peddling lies about COVID. You saw the media in the US running to Fauci, who is an expert. And because in those nations, people can be independent, on several occasions, we saw Fauci contradicting the head of state. Of course, he had no power to sack him. So it was okay for them to contradict each other on a day-to-day basis, Fauci versus Donald Trump. In fact, at some point, you would even think that Fauci was a political competitor of Donald Trump. Yet he was just an expert in the field who had headed the institute for over 30 years. I mean, he had seen several presidents in the US as head of that institute. But you saw that during COVID, the role of experts became more important. In fact, there are many studies that have even shown that COVID helped to bring back the seemingly lost ground of the traditional media, because there was a lot of information and people couldn't trust it. So after reading comments in the Facebook, Twitter, which is now X, and all the other platforms, they would want to go to a traditional platform to validate what they have seen, what they've heard. So in a way, for us in the traditional media, COVID helped us in some ways, even locally here. People would hear something doing rounds, but they would wait for a news bulletin to see, is NTV going to run a story about this? But how is NTV, how is NBS, how is BBS going to validate and debunk some of these theories without the experts? So the experts are going to be very critical. So again, in the case of publicly funded research, taxpayers are also able to know through the press the results of the research they indirectly funded. So it's also some form of accountability. In fact, that's why on several occasions we've had people say that research is overrated. I think you've heard these statements, that researchers are overrated. What do they do? When is it fruitful? I mean, people will hear that there is UVRI, and one of the most important things it does is research. So an ordinary Ugandan will ask, oh, sorry, MRC. So somebody will ask, what does MRC do? How does it benefit us? How does it benefit us? So if it's publicly funded research, its publication in the media, it's some form of accountability. But even if it's donor funded, the money from donors is also taxpayers' money. So accountability is key. Funders can also be influenced by the media profile of researchers when considering applications. I mean, participants in this meeting, you know this pretty well. If you're writing proposals for grants, there are quite a number of things that are considered, that panels consider when choosing who to give funding for research. So even at an individual level, it is beneficial for us as researchers to publicize our works. There is also evidence of a strong correlation between media consumption and confidence in science. I mean, people gain more confidence in what scientists bring to the table if they see it more regularly in the press. If they see it more regularly in the press. I mean, you know pretty well if you follow the climate change debate. If you meet a Republican in the US and you tell them that there is something called climate change, they will say it's a lie. For them, it's a hoax. It does not exist. Republican, there's a very big conference regarding climate change going on in Kenya. But if you meet a typical Republican and you tell him or her that it is something called climate change, they are going to tell you that's a Chinese hoax. They want to stop us from manufacturing so that they can overtake us, creating an impression that the gases emitted are going to destroy the world. So how do you debunk such theories? How do you debunk such theories? And the information they consume to perpetuate those impressions is through the press. So the best way to reach out to those people is for you to go for them in those channels where they find their information. Because you see, the media wires us to think the way we think without knowing. So in many instances, you even think you're making a rational decision to buy a certain dress, to buy a certain brand of a car, yet in actual sense, somebody wired you to think that the Hollywood movies that you've been watching since childhood have created an impression that, that you must drive a Benz, that you should go for a Range Rover. So you grow up thinking that that's the best thing. But I mean, somebody wired you to think that. Somebody wired you to think that. So even in those countries where there are very big debates regarding science, people from childhood are wired through the press, through the media, to think in a certain way. So if you want to address those challenges, you've got to use those very same platforms. Again, mentions in news articles contribute to the article's altimetric attention score. In other words, you're talking about measurement and tracking of the impact of your work. How many times it has been downloaded, talked about, and referenced outside traditional channels. Traditional channels, we are talking about our typical academic channels, where it has been referenced in a book, in a journal article, in an academic presentation somewhere, a conference paper. So the altimetric attention score goes beyond that, which is a very good thing for an individual research. Again, through the media, research findings can inform policy and practice. Professor Wang, you remember during COVID, Anderson was talking about him. He was largely helped by the media. Otherwise, the bureaucracies within the system were stifling him. The bureaucracies were. So he went all out to the press. What happened? He even got government funding. Today, almost all drug shops you're going to go to, you're going to find these products there. But do you think this product was produced during 2020? No. Certainly not. Certainly not. But he was keeping it to himself in the laboratories in Uganda University of Science and Technology. So the media also helps to inform policy and practice. So as scientists, you've got to make very good use of it. Media mentions also help to boost the brand and the reputation of the institutions involved in research. Because if you get to know that every major finding regarding science in the last 4 years is related to MRC, it's a very good thing. Not that you just want to toot your own horn, but what's the purpose of coming up with groundbreaking findings that people never get to know about? So it's important that we use the media effectively to toot our own horn. Next slide. So reporting science is very important, as we've observed, but it requires a degree of accuracy. You see, accuracy is an attribute in journalism. So for every story, even if it is entertainment news, we believe as journalists that accuracy is key. But it becomes more important when we get to science reportage for quite a number of reasons. One, but even before we get there, when we're talking about accuracy, we are talking in terms of the facts. We are talking in terms of headings, captions, and pictures. Because accuracy is not just about stating the material facts in the body of the story, but does the heading capture appropriate what is within the story? Because sometimes as reporters, we are tempted to tweak headlines and make them sensational because we want to catch the attention of our editors, news producers. So that's also a problem when it comes to accuracy. In fact, when you look at categories of fake news, even skewed headlines are examples of fake news. Skewed headlines are examples of fake news. So when we are talking about accuracy, we mean we are talking about facts. Of course, in the majority of the cases, when we talk about accuracy in journalism, our minds are going to go to facts. But it goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. Even the context of the story is important. Even the context of the story. And we are saying one of the reasons as to why accuracy is very important in science journalism, it is an ethical value. So it's an ethical issue. We are obligated. We are obligated to be accurate in the collection, processing, and dissemination of this information. Then, the other reason as why we ought to be accurate is sources shun media houses or journalists who misrepresent facts. I, for one, sometimes media houses interview me on quite a number of things. In majority of the cases, I'm interviewed on issues to do with regional and global politics. But there are reporters I have told, I will never have an interview with you again. Because you say different things, you say totally different reports as you sit in your sitting room to watch a bulletin. And you wonder whether the fellow could not get what you were explaining, or the reporter's mind already had a story and just wanted to use you to fit into what they wanted to disseminate. So sources, because somebody said it here, that researchers don't want to interact with the media. And this is one of the reasons as to why they do not want. This is is one of the reasons. So instead of asking those questions at source to understand the story properly, you assume that you know everything and you misrepresent the facts. So the researcher is going to be embarrassed because all the other benefits I talked about in my earlier presentation are going to be shattered. Because the people consuming the content are going to wonder, is this Kazibwe who is saying these things? That he doesn't even know the basic facts in this area. So instead of your interview story being beneficial to the researcher and to the general public, it has done more harm than good. So it is important that we do not misrepresent facts. We do not gloss stories out of context, because we are fond of doing that as journalists. Now, once you do that, over the years, sources are going to shun you. You're only going to get those that want to appear on TV as talking heads, but serious sources are going to shun you. They are going to shun you. So misrepresentation of facts is very important. In fact, that's why you see, for majority of these online publications, serious people don't want to do interviews with them. They don't. You're going to find many experts who say, I will speak to people in the traditional media, because at least you're certain that there is a certain gatekeeping process that is going to assure, to ensure that there is a degree of virtuousness. Because I don't expect a journalist to present my findings with surgical precision, certainly not. I do not. But an acceptable level. An acceptable level. So, again, misrepresentation of facts can accelerate the spread of diseases. 10 years ago, we saw what happened in West Africa. Once the media misrepresented facts, the population discarded all the SOPs, and it was total disaster, total disaster. Villages became empty, just like during the early days of HIV in Raqqa and some places. You know that there are some villages that were left deserted. This person was dying, the other one was dying, the remaining few decided to take off, that won't be able to deal with these charms that have stormed this village, because people weren't so sure of what was happening at the time. So 10 years ago, a similar thing happened in West Africa, but largely fueled by the media and because of misrepresentation of facts. Just recently, campaigns against vaccinations exacerbated the spread of COVID, including in the Western world. The media disputed the utility of masks, social distancing, etc. So those are very major concerns that in the execution of your duty, you end up perpetuating problems. So in the execution of our duties as media practitioners, certainly there are quite very big challenges. We know that the science story is a very big story. Which seems to remain the same day after day. And that's why, in some instances, people say research is overrated, because to an ordinary observer, some studies do not look to be any different. I mean, for researchers, it is easy to know the difference. But to a casual observer, the instances where an ordinary observer would say, now, you spent a lot of money on this study. These were the findings. This seems to be the very same study. It can be quite a challenge. So it remains the same day after day. Journalists and audiences are used to listening, reading, and watching something new and exciting. So in other words, to pick a story out of something that is not necessarily exciting, out of something that seems to be the same every other day, is not for an average journalist. It's not for an average journalist. It requires some bit of sophistication. It requires an individual who is self-motivated, who's going to take time to read, to ask critical questions. Not one who is interested in filing 10 stories a day because you paid per story. If that's the motivation, you can't do science reporting because the stories require time. The media landscape does not help the situation. We have over 200 radio stations, over 60 TV stations, and many of them so small and scattered to sustain experienced personnel with the skills to write these stories. So yet we know science reporting requires experienced and skilled journalists who can ask scientists and policymakers informed questions. Again, due to challenges of remuneration, as soon as journalists get the experience, they cross over to much more paying jobs in the corporate world. So scientists have got to be aware that this is the life we live. It's a less than ideal situation, but it's the Uganda in which you operate. I mean, a US president earns about $400,000 a year, but there are giants like Bill O'Reilly. By the time he quit Fox, he was earning $24 million a year. The president earning 400,000, the giants earning $24 million.
Just like our president here, he earns
So I won't go into that, but the point I'm making is quite clear. It's quite clear that in our situation, we are going to continue to grapple with these challenges. So every 5 years, MRC should know that we are going to be dealing with a largely new group. So the way you deal with them is not the way you're going to deal with the people who have been there for 20 years, who have been covering this beat for 20 years. Because when you cover a beat for some time, you even become an expert of sorts. If you watch CNN and you watch Richard Quest when there is an aviation crisis, you might think he was either a pilot or managed one of the leading airlines in the world. That's the impression you might get. But because he has been around the subject for quite some good time, he has been around the subject for quite some good time. So if that is the challenge we are facing, so it means scientists have got to find a way of working with these budding journalists by understanding and appreciating the economic situation in which we operate. Again, good science stories are not events driven. They are stories that are going to start with brainstorming. Because even when a scientist presents research findings, they are not necessarily the stories that are going to be on page 1 or story number 1. So for you to even turn it into a story, you need some self-reflection to think deeply about it. Look for an interesting and exciting angle. You begin to imagine other potential sources to validate the story. So for somebody whose interest is in the quantity of stories a day and a month, that's not going to be a focus area. The need to beat deadlines is also a major constraint in informative journalism. Just the natural competition to have their bylines. perpetually often robs the scientists of the chances of making news. So the scientists get frustrated. Even when they try to reach out to you, they send press releases, nothing ever comes out of them. Then there is apathy to reading and research by journalists covering environment issues. Past are the days when journalists were contemporaries of novelists. Because you need to be interested in reading for you to be a very good science reporter. You need to be interested in reading. The audience also seems less interested in science stories. I mean, which is common in all emerging economies. In all emerging economies, the majority of the people are not necessarily going to be interested in things that change their lives. If it's the talk about Jose Chameleon, majority are going to be alert. But if it's about something that affects them, I mean, in a country like Uganda, where 80% depend on agriculture, directly and indirectly, you'd expect that agriculture programs would be the most popular. On the contrary, when you survey or research findings, they are not popular at all. In fact, managers of radio stations force this content onto the public. So it means you've got to find smarter ways of delivering this information, which is very critical. Next. So, how do we overcome some of these challenges? Here, I'm just proposing a few. I know you have many others given your experience. In order to get the interest of the audiences, we need as journalists to also report on solutions. We need to report on solutions. We ought to explain to our audiences measures that can be taken to prevent disease outbreaks. I met somebody one day who told me, I don't listen to that radio whenever I have programs regarding HIV. Because they send me in the state of agony, I begin to think about death. So how do you give hope to such people so that they can be interested in listening to programs dealing with HIV? I mean, and there are by the many people who will tell you so. That I'd rather listen to an entertainment show. But those shows talking about diseases, you're going to die, blah, blah, the non-communicable diseases are now on the rise. If you sit in the office the entire day, things like that. So one of the ways to overcome such challenges is that we quickly get to the solutions to show the audiences that, yes, the challenges exist, but they are not insurmountable. They are not insurmountable. Then you can also tell stories from different perspectives. You can look at them from the perspective of international affairs, treaties, agreements on health, etc. Instead of your story to always be categorized as a health story. And in some sessions, they will have one segment of health focus, 2 minutes once a week. So if you are 10 reporters, when will your story appear there? So you end up being frustrated and you say, I have abandoned that area. Let me focus on these day-to-day stories, controversial ones. But it's up to you to tweak these stories. They can even appear as business stories. They can appear as international stories. So it's about how you angle them, so that as you present them to your editor, they are not always health stories. Because it's very difficult for a health story to hit page 1 unless if it's controversial, unless if they've stolen in drugs. So we've got to be smart. We can also look at them as business stories. The example of the green industries, banks providing loans to farmers, things like that. We can also look at them as general assignment stories, such as illnesses, deaths resulting from heat waves, and how drought increases the spread of diseases. So the idea is to have multiple angles so that we are not blocked out at the very beginning. As you try to sponsor an idea in an editorial meeting, you immediately told, no, we already have a story for the health focus this week. So look for alternative angles. We also need to avoid a false balance, which usually puts off scientists and researchers. What do we mean here? In the attempt to balance stories, journalists end up reporting perspectives of skeptics as counterweight to accepted science. Are you familiar with this scenario? I mean, an expert from MRC has researched, I mean, the profile speaks for itself to the publications in the area. Has just conducted a groundbreaking research. It has even been published in a highly recognized peer-reviewed journal. After getting the interview, you look for social media influencer. What do you say about social distancing regarding the COVID? I mean, how would I speak to you again? So it can only include such conspiracy theories if the aim of the story is to debunk the falsehoods and the conspiracies. There it makes sense. Because from the introduction, it's clear that your story is about debunking. But if it's a general informative story, it's an educative story. You come speak to an expert, and you, because you are taught in the journalism school that stories must be balanced, you run into a conspiracy theorist who has been ranting all over the place. So scientists will run away from you. James Fan, a global director of environmental programs at Internews, once gave an example of an overwhelming majority of climatologists who have consented that global temperatures have risen compared to pre-800s. Yet there are non-climatologists who are opposed to this view. So you speak to the climatologists, and then you look for somebody who's not an expert in the area to provide a balance. So if you want to give a story a critical review, again, look for experts, for authorities in the area. Because researchers don't fear criticism. I mean, if you published in any scholarly journal, you know what it means. There are 2 papers I published last year. It took me 2 years to get them through. And what does that mean? Sending them, they are returned as trash, you push them back, they are returned as trash, you make a correction. Sometimes you even have to go back to the field. So researchers are used to that. But who is providing the criticism? That's the most important point. Who is providing the criticism? So we say researchers shy off from us. They want to avoid those problems. So they are better off to remain in their safe environments. So it's not, okay. No, let's continue. We again need to move away from the reactive stage to the proactive stage and go beyond who said what. On many occasions, just wait to report what politicians and policymakers have said in relation to science. We ought to know that scientists are also good sources and should thus be utilized. So sometimes you watch news and you see reporters asking parliamentarians very critical issues in areas that are completely outside their expertise. And of course, you can't be disappointed by the responses. But during prime time news, so sometimes you even forced to switch off TV and go to bed. So the sources are also offended when these things happen. It is important for journalists to themselves specialize in this area. Specialization helps us to become Experts in what? Meaning that even when you ask critical questions, even when you ask questions at press conferences, the questions are critical and they are informed questions, because respondents, especially experts, do not want to speak to people who are completely green. I remember one time when I was still a field reporter, we had a press conference at the DP headquarters. John Savannah was still DP president. So when time came for questions, the first person to put up a question asked, "Yes, I'm reporting for this media house, but what is your name, sir?" Asking a DP president at a DP. I mean, we're at City House there. I'm not just making up a story. So imagine you're speaking to a scientist, because you even need to do background check. So do you just went out of your bed and run to a press conference? Because that's what it certainly means. You need to profile your sources. It's the best way to be able to ask relevant questions. Because you see, the challenge in the field, in the academia is, the higher you go, the narrower your scope becomes. You see the trend? The narrower the scope becomes. So for you might assume, because this guy is a medical doctor and has a PhD, he can answer all questions related to medicine. It doesn't work like that. But simple profiling helps you to appreciate the authority he or she has in a specific field. So specialization is key. Of course, in our environment, you can't specialize in one area without engaging in general assignment news. But it's all about how you program yourself. You can say, in a month, while on a day-to-day basis I deliver these general assignment stories, because your media house wants them. They are the engine of the media house. But I devote time to at least 2 important science stories. So in a way, besides engaging in general assignment news, you also specialize in a specific area. It's not only good for your audience, but also for your career advancement as an individual. Because you can't boast to have an experience of 20 years without a specific experience in a particular genre of journalism. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't. For 25 years, I'm a general assignment reporter. My God, that's total disaster. You're not an authority in at least 1 or 2 areas. And how do you become an authority? You can go back to school, but you can also learn on your own. Learn on your own, engaging the people who matter in the area. That's one of the best ways to widen your knowledge base. So, but it's also important for science to know that news is timely. So, journalists have challenges, but sometimes also scientists have challenges. There are some times where information can be delivered within a day, but the scientist will still insist, give me a week. Yet it is possible to deliver that information in a day. But probably because scientists do not know that news is timely. So researchers and scientists have also got to appreciate that news is timely. A journalist is spending valuable time to chase a particular story. After a passage of a certain time period, it will no longer be a story. So his energy will be wasted. So once you refuse to provide the information because of the bureaucracies within an organization, the reporter will find a conspiracy theorist and the story will be complete. So who is the loser? We end up being all losers. So despite the challenges involved, there are various smart ways that can be adopted to tell the science story, as well as the opportunities for the storytellers. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Nature of alcoholic stories. I marked that word there. I think we've learned a lot. The special section because of this and disinformation. We are going to be going to another session.